Hi, we're Jeff and Kathy Boyum, and we live in Minnesota in the United States, at the center, at the top. That's where we are. We're currently the King's Kids International USA coordinators. We've been with King's Kids now, I think, about 20 years, and it's been a great experience for us.
Yeah, we have 7 children who are now mostly young adults, and literally they've all been raised within King's Kids and have been a part of everything we've done. So it's not just Jeff and I, but it's been Jeff and I and our family.
And we've got 100,000 stories that we could share, and I think we have one just within our family about how in allowing King's Kids and the principals in King's Kids to lead and guide us and everything, and stuff like this happens.
One of the principles that actually grabbed our heart at the beginning when we first heard about King's Kids is the spiritual capacity of children, that children from the youngest of ages on up can come to know God and love Him with all their heart and hear His voice and be obedient to Him and be used by Him for His glory. So one example from our family's life is that a number of years ago, when our son Hans was 5 and our daughter Eva was 2, and our son Eric was 14, we got an email about a terrible tragedy that had happened in Chennai, India, at a home for street boys. And in the end, we found out that it was a King's Kids ministry. We didn't know that when we first got the email. But when I read the email, they were desperately in need of staff. They had children, they had lost all their staff because of the tragedy. They had street boys that were having nightmares and having trouble eating. So they put out a request for prayer, but also for anybody to come over for 2 or 3 months to kind of take charge of the home and be a house mother there. And I said to my husband, I would like to be able to go. I wish I could go. And he said, you should pray about going. So that started our family in on praying about the possibility of me heading over there. And we began to sense that it might be a yes. And I knew that I had to take our 2-year-old Eva with me because she was too young to be without her mother. Our 14-year-old son felt right away that he was supposed to also go with us. But our 5-year-old son, Hans, I felt pretty strongly that in order for me to go for 3 months, he needed to also come because he was quite attached to me and I didn't feel comfortable leaving him behind. Jeff, however, thought that to go over to a country I'd never been to and suddenly be the house mother for 18 boys that didn't speak English and lived in a totally different culture than me, at the same time having a 2- and 5-year-old to take care of would be just too difficult. So he was against that, and I said, okay, Lord, what are we going to do here? I feel that I need to take Hans, but my husband doesn't agree. You're going to have to speak to him. So one day I was sitting next to Hans on the couch. I was reading, he was eating ice cream. Jeff was in the room on a different chair. And suddenly Hans looked up, and in a voice much stronger than he usually spoke in, he said, Mom, God is telling me that you are supposed to go to India. And then he kept eating his ice cream. And he had spoken in such a strong fashion that my husband and I looked at each other like, whoa, that's not Hans's normal voice. I wonder what that was all about. And then a minute or two later, Hans looked back at me and said, and Mom, God is telling me that I am supposed to go with you. And Jeff said, what do you mean he's telling you? And Hans said, he's telling me. Right now, in my mind, he's telling me that you're supposed to go to India and I am supposed to go with you. And it was said in such a prophetic, authoritative way that Jeff was convinced that it was the word of the Lord spoken through Hans into this situation. And so therefore myself and those 3 of our children, 14-year-old son and Hans and Eva, went to India for 3 months, and when we arrived at the Street Kids home, the younger boys were totally happy to have us there, but the older boys, who were really young men in their early 20s, they were as cold as ice towards me, which I really didn't blame them for, but their attitude seemed to be, who are you, American woman, white woman coming over from America to be our mother? And I thought, okay, how is this going to go for the next 3 months? But in the end, before too terribly long, It was Hans in his charming 5-year-old way, loving everybody with the love of God, and then Eva in her cute little 2-year-old way that wormed their way into the hearts of the older boys and completely melted their hearts, and then opened the door for me to have an influence in their lives. And so even though it's true that it was a little harder for me to be there with my 2 youngest children, I wouldn't have had it any other way, because they were an integral part of the ministry there and of God spreading his love to these street boys and helping their hearts to open to not only our love but the love of God. So
And then
spiritual
again-
capacity of children.
And then again, Hans played an important part in hearing from the Lord on our family, eventually moving to India 2 years later, 1.5 years later.
Yep, we have lots of stories, but there's
Yeah,
one
lots,
for you.
lots of cool things. Part of what we want to see in the United States with King's Kids is a return to, I guess, our roots with YWAM. Our family, King's Kids, is part of the YWAM family, and when we started 20 years ago, there were many expressions of King's Kids in the YWAM bases around the United States, and many of those have closed down. Leaders have moved on. Different ministries have come in, and now we're at a place of rebuilding relationships within our YWAM family and introducing fresh King's Kids once again.
Yeah, and we also have, just as our overall vision, probably the biggest thing on our heart is the encouragement of Christian families, that they have been blessed by God so that they can be a blessing to the world, and that even we individually have destinies that are from the Lord, but God puts families together for his purposes as well. And so a family has a destiny in God. We want to encourage Christian families with that message, get them excited about loving God together, listening to God together, obeying him in the various ways that he asks them or directs them to reach out to other people with his love. I guess we feel too that in the coming days, as things get more difficult all around the world and including in our nation, it's not going to be as easy necessarily to gather together at churches and be with our Christian family that way. But as a family, and maybe gather together with other Christian families in and through the home, as we love God together, as we worship him together, as we invite others in, and as we reach out together with his love, we can make a huge impact for the kingdom of God in these coming days. And so we really have a desire to encourage families with their God-given destinies.